Every day we've got a whole bunch of great news to share with you, but today we've got some absolutely silly, some of it even predictable news, but we're going to share. Yes, we've got news about Nikola, about Lucid, about Mercedes, and more. It is patently ridiculous, but I am here to give you some insights, and I'm joined by my buddy Herbert, who is insightful himself, not to mention brighter. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It is so surprising. Nikola has filed for bankruptcy. Yeah. Who could have seen this coming? And it's unfortunate. There are parts of the mission that made sense, but they made a bunch of bad moves early. And then a year and a half ago, 2 years, they really pivoted to hydrogen. And then after doing that, they sold off all of their hydrogen infrastructure for short-term cash to a company that would then manage it and charge them for it. And that is, if you actually believed that you were going into hydrogen, I would argue that's the wrong approach. Thoughts on Nikola?
Nikola, well, of course, the CEO spent 4 years in jail, right? He's out now. But like you said, how did you know that this was coming? I mean, it's it's hard, right? Its prototypes are easy, as Elon says, and execution is hard. And as soon as you start lying to the investors and to the board, to your company, your own company, that you have this working product, right? So they're famously the one with the semi they made it look like that it was actually driving, but it wasn't. It was just rolling down a hill. They weren't able to make a real product yet. And we just talked about how other car makers are just bleeding cash still. Almost, we don't know any electric vehicle maker that's actually profitable at this point. I'm sure there are. It's basically at the end of the day very, very difficult. So, it's they raised a lot of money. Did you see this? At one point, Nikola was valued more than Ford Motor Company at one point.
Yeah.
So the hype was so big, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. Right. That's the only problem. So.
Yeah.
Trevor Milton, fraud.
It's
sentenced to 4 years.
Yeah. There we go. Sentenced to 4 years in prison. I don't know how much of that he actually served. Right. But what?
2022. So it's 25 now. So he's out now.
He's out now. He didn't.
I think so.
Do the majority of it. This is a truly painful slideshow. So I'm just going to list them. These are the others that have fallen. Fisker 1.0 and 2.0, Canoe, sadly, Coda Automotive, Bright Automotive, Arrival, Sono, Electric Last Mile Solutions, not as familiar with them, Proterra, and Lordstown.
I mean, this is part and parcel of a hot and new industry. You're going to get hundreds of new entrants, and you'll have hundreds that die. It's happening in China as well, and that's fine. That is part of, who can get out there and survive. And then there's a winnowing out of the best companies. It's good. So part of this is like, no, this is normal for a hot new industry. Remember when, the dot-com bust that happened in 2000? Well, was the internet still hot? Yes. Did the internet actually provide real revolution? Yes. But not every company that formed had a good idea. They didn't have the right skill sets. They thought that they should get into the market because it's good and growing, but they didn't have the ability, the chops to make it happen. So then a bunch of them die. And then the ones that survive continue on, and they prove out that this is true market. So it's just normal.
Of course, I lived in Seattle during that time of bust, and Seattle was a big beneficiary of the dot-com bubble. And I knew people at a variety of those companies. Some of those companies were truly, truly stupid. You would look at it and say, why? And the answer is because someone funded us. So we're doing it. Yeah. And other companies, I had a friend who worked at Real Networks, massive layoffs. But Real Networks was a real company with a real product. And their plan was not to fold. We can weather this storm. It's just going to suck. And they emerged stronger. I will point out that on Nikola, Sandy Monroe and his team had a chance to go out, talk to them, see the trucks, drive the trucks, and he was very impressed with the engineering. That led too many people to believe that because the engineering looked good, and worked well in a demo, that it meant Sandy was endorsing the company or the stock. That is not what he was doing. I don't remember how clearly he stated it, but I believe he did state, I can't speak to the financials. When you see having a good product is not enough. You have to have a good product on which you can make money in a market that is interested in buying it. And that is not what Nikola was. So
I mean,
don't.
Great prototype, but it's hard to actually create production. That's production hell. Because that's the product itself, right? Elon just posted that recently. It's the factory that's the actual product.
When you're losing $1 million a truck, it's hard to stay in business. Yep. Well, they only sold, last year was their record year. They sold, I believe, 208 trucks for the whole year. That's a problem. We are going to see individual days, perhaps even this year, when the Tesla Semi sells that many, certainly by next year. But yes, now I've got a very difficult question for you, because Herbert, remember, we're talking about the best, the news there is, battery or hydrogen. Which one is going to be the wave of the future, my friend?
Oh my God. This is hilarious. It's so funny because obviously hydrogen fuel, I mean, I even had my father-in-law 5-10 years ago convince me that hydrogen is going to replace battery electric vehicles. He didn't believe in Tesla. He said, don't you know? And, you know, obviously it was marketed really, really well by the gas stations and the gas and oil industry, because hydrogen is something you still need to, you know, it could fit nicely. You know, instead of a combustion engine, we'll do hydrogen as a replacement for it. And there's like, it doesn't appear anywhere. It's not been sold anywhere. It's never even there yet. It still pops up with an article, people believing that this is even an option. It's ridiculous. There is zero chance that hydrogen will beat the battery electric vehicles, because and I've seen this beautiful chart that explained it all, right? The cost, once you take the hydrogen out of the ground, when you first produce, you know, refine it and get it out, what it needs to do to get all the way to the car, it's just so much effort, and how much you lose in terms of just electricity. Just boom, it's right there. So doesn't make sense.
At CES last year, not this year, but last year, I went to the Hyundai presentation on press day, and the presentation was about hydrogen, and my goodness, was it a head scratcher. They said, look, check this out. Plastic water bottles, the disposable kind, disposable, those are free. We get those. We turn them back into oil, basically. And then from there, we do the hydrogen, we fracture out the hydrogen, get that out, the reformed hydrogen. I mean, first we have to turn it into the gaseous state, and then we do that. And then we transport the hydrogen into basically a hydrogen electric fuel cell vehicle. And I'm thinking about this, and I asked other people in attendance, what did you think of it? And all of the tech people I knew were like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And all of the non-tech people were like, this is genius. But if I was the bean counter, I would say, wait, why are we starting with water bottles with plastic garbage that has to be gathered and cleaned? Let's skip that step. Let's just start with oil. Well, that's where we are today. That's where we already are.
They're just positioning as clean energy. Yeah.
99% of commercially available hydrogen comes from natural gas.
Yeah.
And then, but then if I'm really the bean counter, what I'm going to say is, if we're trying to make electricity for our vehicle, why don't we start with electricity for the vehicle? It makes no sense. And I'm here to tell you that even though it is not disclosed, this article is clearly sponsored by Big Oil. The growth of electric vehicles has slowed down, but it's probably because the technical advances people wanted and expected have not materialized. Did you know? Of all the dumb things. And then there's the diamond battery, which is said to run for thousands of years. I mean, what are we doing? But, you know, but I've got some even better news for you, Herbert. I hope you're ready. One no-brainer EV stock to buy right now. Now, I will warn you, this article is a couple days old.
Tesla.
It is not. It is not. Every investor wants to find the next Tesla.
Okay.
It's Lucid.
When was this article written?
2 days ago. This was on the 23rd. We're recording this on the 25th.
All right. Well, let's talk Lucid.
Or
You're
26th. I'm not kidding you. This was
hilarious.
published 3 days prior to this going out, which is So this was on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Lucid, they still think Lucid's going to be the next Tesla. This is crazy.
Might is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. But and I feel like I saw this on your show just the other day with guest Brian White. Lucid announces the CEO transition. What's going on at Lucid?
Yeah, so the Lucid just reported their fourth quarter earnings. They produced something like 9,000 cars for all of 2024, and they're projecting that they're forecasting they're going to do 20,000 cars. So first of all, these are tiny numbers, but they lost something like $265 million in a quarter. So they're still losing money big time. But the shocker was that they kicked out the CEO, Peter Rawlinson. And it was pretty weird the way they did it, right? Because they didn't let him speak at the earnings call. They just said that he's got a new role. He's now the strategic technical advisor to the board chairman. But meantime, they've made the COO the interim CEO while they've hired a search firm to go and get you a new CEO. So it's like, okay, if it wasn't an amicable breakup, they would have just said, hey, we love you, Peter, but just stay on as CEO until we get a new CEO and we'll do a proper succession plan. That's not what they did. They moved him off to some stupid role. It's really nothing role, and then have this interim COO, but he's only interim. So clearly there was some, basically this is it. We're done. They're down. And whether the Saudis will continue to invest and prop them up and this company will survive, that can happen. But right now, the actual idea that they're going to be the next Tesla is so far. They've produced 11,000 cars. So that's just not enough to say anything about this company at this point.
It is, just to clarify, this Tesla killer of which we speak, Lucid, this investment opportunity, as the Fool calls it, and I mean that both literally and figuratively, the Motley Fool is comprised, as far as I can tell, entirely of fools. They are load-bearing. Just to be clear, their aspiration is that this year they will double their production to the point where they will reach 1% of Tesla's production from 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's a killer, all right. That's a killer.
Yeah.
Last big dumb story. Mercedes will abandon its separate EV lineup. Future electric cars will carry the names of the gas model plus an EQ suffix. They're rethinking their strategy amid declining sales. They've learned that future models will look more like the gas cars by dropping the super slippery styling of the EQS front end, which is fine because it looks ridiculous and no one wishes to drive a bar of soap. They're still going ahead with the technology. They are just a bit rudderless. Thoughts on that?
And it's not the first one, right? We've been reporting on a regular basis. More and more of these car companies are announcing several things. And one is, I think two of them just a week ago, can't remember the names at this point. I'm getting them all mixed up. Basically said the same thing. We are now going to continue focusing on just gas cars and or hybrids.
VW and Audi was a recent announcement.
VW and Audi, those were them. Yeah. So it's just Mercedes now saying the same thing, right? The way I look at it is that who runs these companies? They are executives that have a 3-year term. So they're going, how do I increase my sales for the next 3 years? Focus on these things. Don't spend the money. Do they care that the company's going to die in 5 to 10 years? Probably not, unless you're a family-owned company. Then you care about the brand and you're looking at the future. You want this to be a legacy. So I think it's just something to think about, that these executives, they have a 3 or 5 year term. They're paid based on, their bonuses based on how much sales they can make this year. And it's gas cars. That's what they're going to do. So the shocking thing is not, the hybrid story is better than the gas story, but we're going to stick with our gas. Okay. Let's see what happens.
Okay. And meanwhile, I'll be over here sticking with hydrogen.
It's just that they don't have the option. That's really what's happened, right? Because they can't make a profit in their electric vehicles. You and I just did a show talking about how Mercedes sales in China has plummeted. And when you have used to be that these brands had significant sales in China, that was the global sales is important. And as soon as you lose China, or like in some cases, like Michael Dunn was saying, that if the Chinese car companies can't get into the US, it's hard for them to actually be a global company. And you need to be a global company to actually then be competitive like Toyota was able to do, right? Go global, enter into the US. So it is important that these Chinese companies get into the US. Now they're everywhere, right? They're in Indonesia, they're in Mexico, they're everywhere. So they're kind of global, but the footprint is global, but they don't have the numbers. And you need to get the numbers in order to actually get the scale to make this really all work. And so as soon as these German car companies lost a significant market share in China, their business model is just flipped, right? It's hard for them to stay afloat at this point. And so I got to cut anything that is not working, that's costing me money, and that I won't see making me money for a little while, and retreat back to gas cars.
Guys, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? Head over to Herbert's channel. He is brighter, and so shall you be should you choose to watch those adventures. Stay tuned, stay juicy. I cannot wait to hear from you, clever robots on the flippity flop.